Hello, my name is Lester Young, and I would like to thank you all who had an opportunity to view my last video. I really humbly appreciate the views of it. You know that you all shared my videos, and I sincerely pray that each video that I place on Facebook, I hope that it will make a difference in some young man's life that will prevent them from making some very bad mistakes that will cost them a lifetime of misery and incarceration and hopefully, even an early death. So I thank you all for that opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity for me to use Facebook as a platform to share my story. And I will continue to place these videos on Facebook with the intentions, as I said, not for self-glorification, self-gratification, or accolades or anything like that. It is for the sole purpose of making a difference in another young man's life. And this is an opportunity for me to give back to someone else in hopes that it would prevent them from making the mistakes that I made at 17, 18, 19 years old, taking another human being life and spending many, many years in the Department of Corrections. But I have received a few questions inbox, from those who had an opportunity to view my videos, and I would like to just answer a few of those questions. Someone asked me, what was the thing that caused me? What was the purpose of me dropping out of school in the ninth grade? Actually got expelled out of high school in the ninth grade. What caused me to choose to sell drugs? What caused me to be an individual that took pride in carrying a weapon, a gun, on his waist at 16, 17 years old? What caused me to see no value in another human being's life? And those are some real good questions, and I like to respond to them because I think again that my story can relate is relatable to most young men today who are in the struggle, striving to understand what direction they need to take in their lives. And that answer is that I was a young man who struggled for most of his teenage years. That critical age of 16 to 19, I struggled with a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self identity, a lack of self worth. I struggled with that for so many years silently, and not making an excuse for my actions, but to say that this is something that, I spoke to thousands of young men in my course of life, through my experiences. And most of these young men that I've spoken to, all of them would agree on a list that self esteem, lack of identity, lack of self-worth, lack of self-concept. These were some of the critical things that caused them to gravitate to a certain behavior, made certain behavior choices that led to incarceration, led to death, led to selling drugs, led to joining gangs, so on and so forth. So, as I said, from 16 to 19, I was a young man who struggled silently with lack of self-esteem. And at this time in my life, I felt that I needed to do something that would give me a sense of self-worth, give me a sense of identity. And it was not through education. I didn't sought out education to give me that. I sought out selling drugs. And most people who, you see young men today, they're selling drugs. It's really not about the money. It's not about the money that you see most of these young men selling drugs, or, in the drug game. It's not really about the money. It's about an identity. Most of these young brothers today, they struggle with a sense of a lack of identity. And because of that lack of identity, they seek something that will give them an identity. And it's unfortunate in a very negative way. For an example, you find today in the society, many people are alarmed today about the gang violence in our communities, and the growth of the gangs in our society, and how the OGs are now recruiting young men at 9, 10, 12, 13, 14 years old to become gang members, to groom them to carry out their criminal enterprise. And this is not shocking. Why? Because they understand that most of the young men today in our society, they struggle with an identity crisis. And because of this lack of identity, most of these young men would seek to be a part of something that will give them an identity. And I was one of those young men. I struggled with that sense of self-worth, that sense of lack of self-esteem, and lack of identity, I sought something that gave me an identity. And as I said, I'm not making excuses for the action. I'm explaining the reason why most of us see, when we see these young men repping their colors, the gang colors, they seek to be the loudest in the crowd. It's all about an identity. It's all about, they're crying out silently. They're crying out silently, telling you, but most of us are not aware, but they're struggling with an identity crisis. They want to be a part of something. They don't know who they are, and because they don't know who they are, they cling to something that will give them a sense of self-worth. I spoke to many gang members over the course of my life, and you will find that most of them will always tell you is that they would die for their color, whether it's red, black, silver, green, whatever that color of that gang, they say they would die for it. And I honestly believe those young men, because when you do not have an identity, your identity becomes a color. And you take pride in that, because for so long you suffered with a lack of identity. Now something comes along and give you an identity, you embrace that and you go hard for it. I did it. You know what I'm saying? I went hard for my community, the neighborhood I lived in. I went hard for it because it gave me an identity. And as I said, it was in the most ironic, strangest ways, and silly as that may sound, that's what it is. So what we have to do as parents, as educators, we have to stop focus on helping build these young men up, building their identity, building their self-esteem up. It's not all about just saying, well, you have to stop this. We have to start looking at the silence that these young men, the suffering that they're suffering silently about, and its identity. This is why, as I said, I sold drugs. It was not for the money. I sold drugs for the reputation. I bought clothes, expensive clothes, to cover up. Give me a sense of self-worth, to give me a sense of self-esteem. Clothes, cars, etc., etc. All these material things that you've seen that men today are trying to accumulate and fight for, it all comes down to lack of self-identity, lack of self-esteem, lack of self-worth. So what we have to do as parents and as educators, we have to begin the process of helping, as I said, helping young men build their self-identity in something greater than them. So that if we have, like you find today, people are now looking for ways to eradicate gangs in our communities. One of the number one ways to eradicate gangs in our community is start helping young men build their own self-identity that does not need a color to give them a sense of self-worth. If we begin helping young men early on in life, building their self-identity, then the prison population will begin to decrease. Because as I said again, most of these young men who are sitting inside these prisons for violent crimes and drugs and so on and so forth, it's all about a silent thing that they suffer with. That's a lack of self-esteem. See, it's not part of manhood or boyhood to come out and openly say, I suffer from self-esteem. I lack a self-identity. I lack this. I lack that. So we suffer with this, and most of us have to understand that this is where the battle begins. Is that we have to begin working with these young men in our communities and helping them build their self-identity, helping build their self-esteem, not allowing them to continue to suffer suffer from this, because it only impacts the community in a negative way when they suffer silently from these things. It is a very painful thing when you don't have a sense of self-identity, when you don't have a sense of self-worth. This is why it's so easy for a person to become violent, a person to hurt the next person, because again, when they look in the mirror at themselves, they don't see anybody that they love. And as I said, I was one of those young men many, many years ago who would look in the mirror and didn't see what I liked because of my lack of self-worth, my lack of self-esteem, my lack of self-love. Now I look in the mirror, I see a man that I love and I adore. And I want you all to understand that this is where we have to begin working with our young men. Again, I thank you all for this opportunity to give me this platform to share my story Hopefully this message that I have tonight will be a message that will be shared, and that will be not liked but was shared, and help open a conversation with our young men to help them understand how vital it is to focus on their self-identity, and knowing that you don't have to be a part of some criminal behavior, criminal lifestyle, some type of gang to have a sense of self-worth and self-identity. It begins with us as parents, educators, mentors, to help our young men begin to build their own identity in something greater than themselves, and that they can have value in themselves so that they can begin to value the next person in life. I ask that you all continue to pray for our community, continue to pray for me, and I continue to pray for you. May God continue to strengthen us and guide us in this journey. You all be blessed. Thank you.